Some walls keep weather out. Some keep armies back. A few seem built to keep questions in. Stand close enough and stone stops acting like stone. It hums. It answers. It gives back a voice that doesn't sound like yours. And ruined corridors, travelers still pause when the air begins to murmur. At sealed doors, ears still lean toward cracks no hand can widen. Across deserts, islands, mountains, and buried cities, the same rumor returns. There is something on the other side. Maybe it is wind. Maybe it is water. Maybe it is a chamber no one has opened in centuries. Tonight we follow 10 ancient walls that made people doubt the silence. Number 10. The Wall of Yerkapi at Hattusa. In central Anatolia, the old Hittite capital still spreads across the hills like a broken command. Its gates are shattered, its temples are open to the sky, and its stonework still feels strangely deliberate. Then you reach Yerkapi, a massive earthen rampart faced with ancient masonry and pierced by a long postern tunnel. You step inside, and the temperature changes before your thoughts do. Sound narrows there. A footstep ahead of you turns crisp, then distant, then oddly close again. The Hittites built Hattusa in the 2nd millennium BCE, and Yerkapi was part fortress, part statement of power. The tunnel beneath it is real, narrow, and perfectly designed to make the air feel occupied. Here's where it gets strange. More than one visitor has described the tunnel as sounding less like a passage and more like a throat. A cough can slide along the stone and come back softened, as if someone farther in answered with the same breath. Archaeologists have practical explanations. Hard surfaces, changing width, and the pressure of enclosed air can bend ordinary sound into something uncanny. That answer makes sense. It just does not fully explain why the place feels louder when no one is speaking. In older tellings, Yerkapi was not only a defensive feature. It was also the kind of engineered threshold ancient states loved, a place where crossing into the city felt ceremonial and controlled. That matters. When a wall is designed to impress, even its echoes begin to feel intentional. Imagine approaching an armor, torchlight moving across fitted stone, your own steps striking the floor in measured bursts. Now imagine hearing another rhythm behind them. Not ahead. Not above. Behind the wall itself. The record gives us a fortress. The body gives us something older than reason. Every enclosed place teaches you where its limits are. Yerkapi does the opposite. It suggests distance where there should be none. Some believe hidden voids or lost side chambers once changed the way the tunnel carried noise. Others think the mystery begins and ends with architecture so competent it still manipulates modern ears. Both ideas can live in the same corridor. That is the unsettling part. You do not need a ghost when geometry can imitate one. And yet once the wind presses through the stones outside, a low rushing tone sometimes seems to come from deeper within. The tunnel never opens into some secret underworld, but for a few seconds your instincts insist that it should. Maybe the Hittites understood that fear. Maybe they wanted enemies to feel surrounded before a single spear was raised. Or maybe a 3,000-year-old wall still knows how to make a human being listen for what is not there. Either way, Yerkapi leaves you with the same thought every good mystery keeps alive. If stone can do this by accident, what was it like when the city was whole? And if this is only number 10, the stranger walls are still ahead. Number 9. The zigzag walls of Sacsayhuaman. Above Cusco, giant stones lock together so tightly that even now they look less built than arranged by patience no longer available to us. Sacsayhuaman is famous for its scale. Some blocks are enormous, angled and joined in a jagged pattern that rises like frozen lightning. In daylight, the place feels exposed and imperial. When the wind turns, it feels like an instrument. The walls belong to the Inca complex overlooking the old capital, though parts may preserve even older building traditions beneath later power. They are celebrated for precision, not for sound. But people who linger there sometimes mention the same detail. The seams seem to carry a note. Not a melody exactly. More a tremor, a humming slip of air that appears to come through the wall rather than across it. That should not surprise us too much. Irregular stone faces, tight joints, shifting wind, and open terraces can create tiny channels where sound behaves unpredictably. The surprising part is how personal it feels. You hear it, stop, and immediately turn toward the masonry, as if something inside called your attention by name. There are local stories, of course. Ancient stones collect them the way shadow collects cold. Some say the walls remember ceremonies. Some say they answer only in certain weather, when the mountain air sinks and the city below grows quiet. No excavated proof tells us the builders intended a hidden voice. Still, intention is not always the only source of wonder. Place your palm against one of those giant faces and you understand why the sight unsettles people. The stone is immense, but the joints are delicate. The wall looks immovable, yet the sound around it never stays still. And then it gets stranger. Because Sacsayhuaman is not just one wall. It is a repeating pattern of terraces, edges, and angles, each one catching the breeze differently. That means the murmur seems to move. A minute ago it came from your left. Now it is lower, closer to your knees, then farther down the line where two blocks pinch together. You start doing what humans always do in sacred ruins. You begin assigning motive to atmosphere. Maybe there is a buried chamber. Maybe there are voids under the terraces. Maybe the sound is only the mountain crossing stone so carefully fitted that it acts like a reed. A skeptic can say, wind. A storyteller can say, memory. The experience itself does not care which word you choose. What matters is that an ancient military and ceremonial complex, built to dominate the horizon, can still make a single listener lean in, as if overhearing a secret. The record says these walls were feats of engineering. The feeling says they were also teachers. They remind you how thin the line is between mastery and mystery. A wall this solid should end a question. At Sacsayhuaman, it begins one. What exactly are you hearing when air passes through a structure that has outlived empires? And if a mountain fortress can seem to whisper, wait until we step into a place designed around the human voice itself. Number 8. The underground walls of the Hypogeum. On Malta, beneath an ordinary modern street, a prehistoric world descends to chambers cut into rock long before classical history began writing itself down. The Hypogeum is older than many people expect. It belongs to a Neolithic ritual landscape, carved and expanded over time into an underground maze of rooms, passages, and curved surfaces. It is quiet there, in the way deep places are quiet. Not empty. Held. One chamber has become especially famous. People often call it the Oracle Room, because the shape and surfaces can send a human voice rolling through the complex in a startling way. Speak in the right range, and the space answers with weight. The sound does not merely echo. It blooms. Researchers and guides have long noted the unusual acoustic effects, and those effects are real enough without needing embellishment. But when a wall takes your voice and returns it as something larger, older, and less clearly yours, explanation does not remove the shiver. Here is where it gets strange. In a place like this, every voice feels as though it comes from the other side of stone. You face one wall, but the resonance gathers elsewhere. A sound begins in your chest, and then seems to stand behind you. No hidden civilization has been found living beyond those carved surfaces. No sealed priesthood waits in a secret annex. Yet the chamber creates the sensation ancient mysteries depend on. Presence without appearance. Origin without certainty. Some people imagine rituals here, chants dropped into darkness while listeners in neighboring rooms felt the rock itself speak. That is a theory, not a proven script. Still, the architecture invites it. The walls curve. The openings frame sound. The underground setting strips away distraction until the ear becomes almost painfully alert. A single syllable can travel like a command. A low note can seem to rise from below the floor and from behind the chamber at once. There is a practical lesson inside the wonder. Ancient builders did not need electricity to understand emotional design. They had mass, contour, and vibration. Give a community a place where speech returns transformed, and you do not just create acoustics. You create authority. That may be all this is. It may also be enough. Because the first time a room makes stone sound alive, your modern habits stop helping. You are no longer judging the site like a tourist. You are receiving it the way ritual spaces were meant to be received. With caution. With awe. With the suspicion that walls can hear. And when ancient sound design becomes this intimate, the next question arrives by itself. How many other sites were built to do more than simply stand? Because our next wall is tied not to the underground voice of worship, but to a sealed Egyptian darkness, where the stone seems to hide its own reply. Number 7. The crypt walls at Dendera. At Dendera in Egypt, reliefs cover temple stone with such density that the walls can feel like packed archives rather than surfaces. The Temple of Hathor is monumental above ground, but some of its most unsettling spaces lie in narrower rooms and crypt-like passages below and within the structure. These are real spaces, cramped and decorated, meant for ritual storage and restricted movement. They were not built for comfort. They were built for control. Walk a tight passage with carved walls inches from your shoulders, and your own breathing becomes part of the architecture. That alone is enough to make a place feel strange. Dendera also carries a modern reputation shaped by mystery culture, especially around misunderstood reliefs and endless speculation. Most of that speculation outruns the evidence. The temple does not need help. Its actual spaces are eerie enough. Some visitors and local accounts describe faint knocking sounds, soft taps, or a pressure of air that seems to come from behind sealed stone. That does not prove hidden machines, lost technologies, or supernatural guardians. It may point to voids, temperature shifts, or the ordinary tricks of enclosed masonry. But that word ordinary begins to wobble in a place like this. Because the walls are so densely carved, so heavy with image and inscription, that any sound beyond them feels instantly meaningful. Here is where it gets strange. The more symbolic the wall, the harder it is to hear it as empty. A bare stone block can hide a cavity. A sacred panel covered in divine processions feels as though it should hide an intention. That is a psychological trap. It is also exactly why ancient spaces retain power. You begin by noticing acoustics. You end by wondering whether access itself was staged, whether priests once moved beyond doors we no longer recognize, whether the wall was always meant to be both image and veil. Some archaeologists have indeed identified hidden spaces or structural complexity in other Egyptian monuments. That makes every suspicious sound in the temple passage harder to dismiss emotionally, even when caution remains essential. The record says Dendera's crypts stored ritual objects. Legend says much more. Between those two poles sits the actual experience. Tight air. Cold stone. A tap you cannot place. Then silence, so complete it feels deliberate. If you have ever been in a building and sensed another room just beyond the wall, you know the instinct. At Dendera, that instinct deepens because the wall is not blank. It is watching you back. Carved eyes, sacred emblems, and processional forms turn architecture into audience. So when a sound seems to answer from the other side, the question grows teeth. What else moved through this temple when it was lit, staffed, and closed to most of the world? Skeptics can hold to airflow and structure. Mystery lovers can entertain hidden passages and lost practices. Both must admit the same thing. A wall that carries gods across its face does not feel silent even when it is. And that tension only tightens as we move from temple corridors to one of Europe's oldest stone passages, where winter itself seems to breathe through the masonry. Number 6. The passage walls of Newgrange. In Ireland, Newgrange rises as a prehistoric mound older than Stonehenge and older than the pyramids of Giza. From outside, it looks composed, almost gentle. From within, it becomes another world of stone passage, chambered darkness, and impossible age. The site is famous for the winter solstice sunrise when light enters and reaches deep into the chamber. That alignment is real and extraordinary. But light is only part of the story. Sound behaves strangely there, too. Anyone moving through a narrow megalithic passage knows the body changes first. Shoulders pull inward. Speech drops. Every scrape of cloth feels louder than intended. At Newgrange, the long corridor of upright stones and roofed passage shapes those small noises until they seem detached from you. The walls are close enough to intimate thought. The chamber ahead is wide enough to distort it. That contrast matters. The sound of a breath in the passage is not the sound of a breath in the chamber. Between the two, the monument performs a kind of conversion. Here is where it gets strange. People often describe the deepest part of such sites as silent, but Newgrange can feel active even in stillness. A faint draft can move through the structure. A quiet voice can rebound at an angle you did not expect. A distant shuffle can sound as if it happened beyond the wall rather than down the passage. None of this requires fantasy. Ancient stone plus narrow geometry equals unusual acoustics. Still, when you are inside a burial monument built around cycles of light and darkness, ordinary physics starts dressing itself like omen. That is the ancient genius. The site does not merely hold the dead. It choreographs the living. Some imagine that chanting or drumming once filled the chamber, with the passage walls feeding sound forward in swallowing direction. That possibility is plausible in a general sense, though our certainty about specific rituals remains limited. What we do know is enough. The monument manipulates experience. If it controls light so precisely, why would it not also alter the way sound reaches the body? And then there is the emotional effect of sealed stone itself. The corbelled chamber rises overhead in careful weight. The passage behind you narrows toward the world you came from. Every wall tells the same story. You are inside something intentional. So when a murmur seems to come from behind the carved curbstones or from some impossible angle inside the mound, the mind does what minds have always done. It imagines another chamber, another keeper, another layer. Archaeology asks for patience. Story asks for a door. Newgrange offers both and fully satisfies neither. That is why the mystery survives. No one has to claim buried voices are real for the monument to feel inhabited by more than silence. And once you have stood inside a tomb that can guide sunlight like a blade, a whisper from the wall no longer feels impossible. But the next side takes us from ritual darkness to survival underground, where hearing something beyond the wall once meant danger, rescue, or both. Number 5. The blocked walls of Derinkuyu. In Cappadocia, central Turkey hides entire underground cities cut into soft volcanic rock, descending level after level below the surface. Derinkuyu is the most famous of them. It was not one room or one tunnel. It was a deep, functional world with ventilation shafts, storage areas, gathering spaces, and heavy circular stone doors designed to close passages fast. That last detail changes everything. A sealed underground city teaches people to listen differently. When movement matters, sound becomes a warning system. When doors close between levels, every wall starts behaving like a messenger. Archaeologists understand Derinkuyu as a place of refuge used and expanded over long periods. Its engineering is impressive enough without embellishment. But anyone imagining life there quickly arrives at the strangest part. What did it sound like when people hid and waited? Here is where it gets strange. A blocked passage never truly goes quiet. Air still works. Stone still conducts pressure. A voice from farther down can flatten, slip around corners, and reach you as a muffled presence through rock and doorway. In a place like Derinkuyu, that effect would have been unforgettable. A family pressed near one chamber wall might hear distant scraping, footsteps, or speech from somewhere beyond the sealed round door. Was it a neighbor? An ally? An enemy testing the other side? The architecture does not answer. It only carries the tension forward. Some modern descriptions of underground cities emphasize claustrophobia, darkness, and maze-like complexity. All true. But what lingers is not only what you see. It is what you cannot locate by ear. Below ground, direction weakens. A sound that should come from ahead arrives from the wall at shoulder height. A knock above you seems to travel through the side passage instead. The city's survival design turns ordinary acoustics into uncertainty. There are legends around such places, naturally. Hidden chapels, hidden burials, hidden sections still unknown. Some of those ideas are romantic inflation. Some may reflect the simple truth that vast underground systems are difficult to map completely in the imagination, even when archaeology has mapped them physically. That gap matters. Human beings do not panic at measured plans. They panic at muffled sounds. Imagine a circular stone door rolled into place. On your side, torchlight barely reaches the edges. Then a faint tapping begins from the dark beyond. Perhaps it is another family trying to signal through rock. Perhaps it is settling stone. Perhaps the tunnel on the other side is empty. But the wall has already done its work. It has turned ignorance into story. Which of these would you dare to open? Tell me below. The record says Derinkuyu was refuge, storage, movement, defense. The feeling says it was also listening. Every underground civilization becomes one big ear. And because the city was built to separate people from danger using thickness, turns, and doors, every sound from the other side carried stakes. Not wonder alone. Need. Urgency. Possibly death. That is why Derinkuyu stays with you. The mystery is not just that the walls seem to speak. It is that someone, once, may have depended on understanding what they said. And from buried refuge, we climb back into daylight for stones so huge that the mystery shifts from human scale to something almost geological. Number 4. The platform walls of Baalbek. In Lebanon, Baalbek is one of those places that makes measurement feel inadequate. The Roman temples dominate the imagination, but beneath and around them lies an older and more complicated architectural story, including the colossal stones of the platform. Some blocks in the wider complex are famous for their sheer size. The so-called trilithon has inspired endless speculation, much of it exaggerated beyond evidence. We do not need wild claims to appreciate the sight. Mass itself is strange. Stand near stone large enough to rewrite your sense of effort, and the place begins generating mystery on its own. Now add retaining walls, hidden structural spaces, varying levels, and the low movement of air through ancient construction. Suddenly, even a simple vibration feels loaded. Visitors sometimes speak of the complex as if it hums. That impression may come from wind, surrounding movement, interior resonances, or the imagination sharpening under scale. Still, there is a particular unease to hearing a low sound near masonry this vast. It feels less like a room speaking than a hillside remembering pressure. Here's where it gets strange. Large stone assemblies can make tiny noises feel enormous. A distant vehicle, a change in wind, a footfall on a higher course, and your body interprets the vibration as something happening inside the wall. That inside matters. With structures this heavy, people instinctively picture cavities, channels, lost phases of construction, buried portions still hidden from easy view. Some of those suspicions are reasonable in ancient monumental sites. They are not proof of secret technologies or impossible builders. But they do keep the question alive. How much of what we see is only the visible skin of a deeper structure? At Baalbek, the answer is never emotionally simple. The site is layered. Empires built over earlier foundations. Stone served changing power. That means a wall here is never just one moment frozen in place. It is accumulated intention. And accumulated intention can sound uncanny when wind or vibration moves through it. Imagine dusk settling into the complex. The great courses cool. Voices lower. Then a muted tremor sings to pass from one section of masonry to another, not loud enough to explain, not sharp enough to locate. A guide might shrug and say, the stones are only catching the world around them. A legend-minded listener might think the wall carries the memory of hidden chambers below. Neither reaction is foolish. Ancient architecture this extreme was meant to alter scale, and scale alters interpretation. A humming wall in a small ruin is curious. A humming wall beneath some of the largest worked stones on Earth feels almost doctrinal. As if the place is teaching you that weight itself can have a voice. The record remains cautious. Good history should be. Baalbek does not confirm fantastic stories people love to attach to it, but it does something more durable. It confronts you with stones so excessive that the smallest, unexplained sound becomes unforgettable. And the next wall on our list is stranger still because water, memory, and Egyptian depth meet in a place where echoes seem to come from beyond visible space. Number 3. The walls of the Osirian at Abydos. At Abydos, one of ancient Egypt's most important sacred landscapes, the Osirian sits like a dream of older stone beneath and behind later grandeur. It is a difficult place to describe without sounding dramatic. Massive blocks, dark passages, water often present or imagined in a setting bound tightly to death, kingship, and the god Osiris. Even before mystery enters, atmosphere has already won. The structure looks severe. It feels submerged even when it is not. The architecture presses downward in the imagination. Some scholars see it as a symbolic, archaic creation tied to later royal ideology rather than some lost primordial monument. That debate belongs to history. The sensation of being there belongs to something more immediate. The walls sound hollow in the mind before they sound hollow in the ear. Here is where it gets strange. In spaces associated with water, stone begins to disguise the source of sound even more effectively. A drip somewhere distant can resemble a whisper close by. A step on one platform may rebound from another angle and seem to emerge beyond a dark retaining face. Because the Osirian feels half structure, half underworld image, every noise arrives already wrapped in symbolism. That is powerful and dangerous. Powerful because it deepens the experience. Dangerous because it tempts us to overclaim. No verified ancient voice comes calling from sealed chambers here. No recovered text tells us walls were built to conceal speaking mechanisms. And yet visitors, readers, and storytellers keep circling the same sensation. The place seems inhabited by pressure. Not by crowds. By pressure. The great stone surfaces and axial arrangement generate a mood in which silence never feels empty. It feels occupied by what has not yet announced itself. Imagine standing beside those heavy walls while water darkens the lower levels and the temperature drops. A faint splash travels. Then a softer after sound seems to come from beyond the masonry, from somewhere you cannot enter. This is exactly the kind of moment sacred architecture was made to heighten. Ancient religion did not separate engineering from emotion. If a place represented passage, rebirth, or contact with divine mystery, then ambiguity was not a flaw. It was part of the language. Some believe lost cavities, blocked roots, or little-studied structural details contribute to the Osirian's lingering acoustic oddities. That may be true in part. Others argue the mystery is mostly produced by scale, water, and expectation. That is probably true in part as well. The deeper truth is that Abydos encourages a specific state of listening. You do not stand there asking only what is physically making the sound. You ask why the place seems prepared for one. And then it gets stranger. Because the Osirian is linked by setting and symbolism to one of Egypt's deepest mythic themes. What lies beyond death but remains near enough to address the living? A wall that seems to carry a voice from the other side is almost too perfect for that landscape. Perhaps that is coincidence. Perhaps it is architecture doing what theology once required it to do. Either way, Abydos leaves a residue in the mind. You walk away feeling that some monuments are not mysterious because they hide answers. They are mysterious because they were built to keep the right questions alive. And now we move from sacred underworld imagery to a city that buried its own secrets beneath volcanic ash, and then began whispering again after rediscovery. Number 2. The sealed walls beneath Teotihuacan. North of modern Mexico City, Teotihuacan still refuses easy explanation. We know much about its scale, planning, and influence. We know far less than we would like about its rulers, many inner meanings, and the full logic of its sacred core. That imbalance keeps the city permanently magnetic. One of the most intriguing discoveries of recent decades involved the tunnel beneath the Temple of the Feathered Serpent. It had been intentionally filled and sealed in antiquity. Excavation revealed a carefully hidden space containing offerings and extraordinary symbolic materials, including liquid mercury in some contexts below the city. Those facts alone are enough to disturb the imagination. A civilization closed a route on purpose, then left it there. Here is where it gets strange. When a place is known to contain sealed underground passages, every wall above it becomes suspicious. Every scrape, draft, and metallic bounce of sound starts feeling like a clue. The temple architecture, stone surfaces, and subterranean voids create ideal conditions for misreading direction. A tool taps one side. The ear reports another. A murmur from an excavation space seems to emerge from behind a face of stone that has not moved in centuries. No one needs to invent fantasy to make this compelling. Teotihuacan already gives us real concealment, real closure, real offering sent into darkness. That is enough to make sound emotionally radioactive. Some have imagined priests moving through passages below while the world above remained ceremonial and controlled. That general image is plausible. Specific dramatic details are harder to prove, and honest storytelling has to admit that. But once you know the city possessed hidden roots and intentionally sealed sacred spaces, you start hearing the architecture differently. The wall is no longer just boundary. It is evidence that access was once managed with precision. That precision changes acoustics into narrative. Suppose you are standing near a stone platform as work continues below. A dull knock travels upward through earth and masonry. You do not hear labor. You hear the past touching the underside of the present. That is why Teotihuacan unnerves people so effectively. Its mysteries are not merely legendary. They are materially staged. Archaeology keeps finding that the city hid more than casual eyes could guess. So, when a sound seems to come from the other side of a wall here, skepticism and wonder arrive together. Perhaps there is a known cavity nearby. Perhaps there is only resonance. Perhaps the sound is ordinary, and your awareness of buried secrecy makes it otherwise. All three can be true in sequence. Then there is the symbolic charge of the place itself. Teotihuacan was a city of alignment, ritual movement, planned vistas, and controlled sacred experience. Hidden passageways belong naturally in that world. So do walls that feel like masks. A mask is not empty because it has no face behind it. It is powerful because you assume one. That is Teotihuacan's genius. The city teaches you to suspect layers. It trains the mind to listen for chambers beneath plazas and intentions behind stone. And when you do hear something uncertain, even something small, the whole complex seems to lean closer. Because if number 2 proves anything, it is that some of history's strangest walls do not only divide spaces, they guard transitions. Which brings us to the most famous ancient masonry on Earth, and to the simplest, most disturbing possibility of all. A wall can keep a room hidden so long that even the faintest sound from beyond it feels like a message from time itself. Number 1. The hidden walls of the Great Pyramid. Giza has no shortage of mystery, and that is precisely why caution matters there more than almost anywhere else. Too many claims rush ahead of evidence. Too many fantasies are sold as certainty. Strip all of that away, and the pyramid remains astonishing enough. It is an ancient monument of immense precision, internal passages, sealed spaces, and still unfinished questions. That last part is crucial. There are known chambers. There are blocked shafts. And there are indications, from modern scanning and ongoing debate, that significant voids may still exist within the structure. A void is not a revelation by itself, but it is an invitation the human mind cannot leave alone. Here is where it gets strange. Inside the pyramid, stone controls sound with unnerving authority. Narrow passages compress it. Larger chambers release it. Rough surfaces and hard planes produce echoes that seem older than the people making them. If you already know that unexplained spaces may still lie beyond certain walls, every acoustic quirk sharpens. A scrape can sound subterranean. A tap can suggest an unseen cavity. A breath can return from the wrong direction and make the chamber feel briefly inhabited. The pyramid's interior has inspired generations of speculation, some careful, some reckless. Honesty requires saying this plainly. Unusual sound is not proof of a hidden archive, secret throne room, lost machine, or forbidden revelation. Most of the time, sound proves only that stone geometry is powerful. But in this monument, that ordinary truth becomes extraordinary experience. Because the walls are not merely old. They belong to one of humanity's most studied and still most debated structures. That context changes the body. You walk differently where hidden space is plausible. You listen differently where sealed intention is already part of the design. Consider the so-called doors at the end of the small shafts discovered from the Queen's chamber. They are real features explored with caution and technology, and they intensified global fascination precisely because they suggested more stone beyond stone. Even when answers remain partial, the effect is lasting. The pyramid became, once again, a monument with another side. Not metaphorically. Physically. And then it gets stranger. Because the Great Pyramid is perhaps the clearest example of how knowledge does not always dissolve awe. Modern scans, engineering study, and repeated investigation have given us more data than ancient visitors could ever imagine. Yet data has not made the walls feel less alive. If anything, it has done the opposite. Now the mystery has contours. There may be spaces we have not entered. There may be design choices we still do not fully understand. So when a chamber seems to throw back sound from an impossible angle, you are not reacting only to echo. You are reacting to the documented fact that this monument still withholds. That withholding is the voice. The wall does not need to speak in words. It speaks by remaining between you and what might still be there. Some imagine lost funerary purpose beyond known routes. Some imagine symbolic spaces never meant for bodies to enter at all. Some argue the acoustics themselves may have mattered more than we appreciate. All remain possibilities or debates, not settled fact. What remains undeniable is the feeling. You stand inside stone assembled nearly 45 centuries ago. You know there may still be emptiness beyond visible surfaces. And for 1 second, when sound returns from where it should not, time stops behaving. The ancient world does not seem gone. It seems adjacent. That is why this wall takes number 1. Not because it proves the wildest theory. Because it does not have to. A structure this famous, this examined, and this unresolved shows how little mystery needs in order to survive. Just thickness. Just silence. Just one convincing suggestion that the silence has depth. We began at Hattusa, where a Hittite tunnel turns footsteps into the suspicion of company. We climbed to Sacsayhuaman, where mountain wind and perfect stone joints make a fortress seem to whisper along its seams. We descended into the Hypogeum of Malta, where carved rock takes a human voice and gives it back like an oracle from inside the wall. We passed through Dendera, where carved Egyptian crypt spaces turn every faint tap into a question about what sacred stone might conceal. We entered Newgrange, where a prehistoric passage teaches winterlight and human breath to feel equally ceremonial. We hid in Derinkuyu, where blocked underground doors transform distant sounds into stakes of survival. We stood at Baalbek, where impossible mass makes even a low vibration feel as if the architecture itself is speaking. We listened at the Osirian of Abydos, where water, shadow, and sacred symbolism make pressure sound almost intentional. We reached Teotihuacan, where real sealed tunnels beneath ritual space teach every wall to feel like a mask over another world. And finally we stood inside the Great Pyramid, where known chambers and possible hidden voids make the smallest echo sound like a message delayed by millennia. 10 walls. 10 different kinds of silence. And yet they all do the same thing. They turn stone into suspense. Maybe the explanation is simple in every case. Wind through joints. Water in hidden channels. Voids, pressure, contour, and the ancient talent for shaping emotion with mass. In many cases, that is probably enough. But enough is not the same as empty. A rational answer can explain a sound and still fail to exhaust it. That is worth remembering whenever we talk about the ancient world. Mystery is not always a gap in knowledge. Sometimes it is the feeling produced when knowledge meets an experience the body still reads as presence. Our ancestors built walls for defense, ritual, prestige, movement, and memory. Some of those walls still do one more thing. They make us listen harder than we want to. And maybe that is their final victory. Not that they hide monsters, treasures, or impossible technologies, but that after centuries of weather and argument, they can still control the pace of a human heartbeat. If you have ever stood in an old place and felt certain a sound came from the wrong side of the stone, you know the sensation. It is small. It is immediate. And it feels older than language. That is why these places endure. They do not simply show us the past. They let the past behave like a nearby room. If this journey pulled you in, subscribe and stay with Ozy Chalk for more ancient mysteries, sealed sites, and histories that refuse to sit quietly. And if you want another descent into the unexplained, choose the next video and keep listening for what history left behind the wall.